Welcome to PolkaWorld Interview. This is Kristen. In this episode, we're going to talk about interoperability. Sean from Parity used to mention that parachains should focus on their own specific scenarios instead of bridging tokens. Polkadot enables cross-blockchain transfers and interoperability with a wide variety of blockchains in the Polkadot network. However, t3rn protocol can not only act as a bridge between two independent blockchains, but can also enable chains of executions across several blockchains. t3rn has been developed to make blockchain interoperability simple and accessible. It's a great honor for us to have the CS of t3rn to be here with us today. Welcome, Jacob. Could you brief us on the background of yourself and the t3rn for us a little bit first?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been working in the blockchain space full-time for 6 years, almost 7 now. I was one of the first team members to join a project called Lisk back in 2017. I led a division in the marketing department there. That's where I met Maciej, the founder of t3rn. He was a head of development over there. And essentially what Lisk was a blockchain application platform developed in JavaScript that tried to leverage sidechain technology. And so that gave us a great environment to really think about how we would see cross-chain, multi-chain looking in the future. And, in 2017, we were sort of talking about this like it was a problem that was going to be solved, in a few months, maybe in 2018, maybe 2019 at the latest, kind of thing, which obviously it's only just getting solved now, to be honest. But working in this environment, it gave us a great opportunity to think about how we'd approach the problem. And so when we left the project in 2020, and obviously, interoperability still hadn't really been solved, we felt very well equipped to tackle the problem. And that's essentially where t3rn was born.
Great. And let's start our first topic. That is, what is interoperability? When talking about interoperability in blockchain, the words that pop up in our minds are XCM, the bridge, and they are all technical level interpretation. For non-tech savvy, they feel lost to understand. So could you please add some flesh to the bones by picture it in layman's term or examples of use cases?
Sure, absolutely. So look, in its simplest terms, blockchain interoperability refers to the ability of blockchains to seamlessly communicate with one another. So, whether that means accessing and sharing data in between these chains, or allowing for smart contracts to execute trustlessly in between the chains, or transferring, digital assets or tokens in between the chains. All of these things are sort of under the umbrella of blockchain interoperability. It's one of the, as we see it, one of the most important aspects of actually making blockchain usable and bringing it to the next billion users and actually allowing it to facilitate and enact its potential. Because the way I think about it, or the way I describe it to my parents is, if mobile phones came out today and, let's say I'm on T-Mobile and I can only call my friends who are on T-Mobile, but if you're on, Vodafone and I can't call you, people would still be adopting and using mobile phones, but, their utility would be substantially less. And so that need for, Vodafone to communicate with T-Mobile, in this example, or blockchains to communicate, I think is not too dissimilar. Blockchains do work and bring value in the real world now, as we've already seen. But I definitely think the next frontier is to break these barriers or these silos that divide blockchains and actually allow them to communicate in a seamless manner, in a trustless manner, and most importantly, in a secure manner.
Yes, I think you already mentioned a little bit that the interoperability is very important, but our next topic is that could you detail us why interoperability is the key to blockchain technologies mass adoption, and why it is t3rn that plays the critical roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different reasons why interoperability is so important. I've already sort of touched on the utility and the usability of blockchains and actually, speeding up their adoption. But if we want to break that down and look a bit more in depth as to what that actually means. So, I mean, I assume your watchers have sort of all participated on some level in DeFi. And, there's no two ways about it, but if you want to shift from, protocol to protocol, from ecosystem to ecosystem, it is a difficult and, straining, unnecessarily so, in my opinion, task. And, that's just one of the many hindrances of an incredible concepts like DeFi being held by blockchains not being interoperable. You should be able to, seamlessly remove liquidity on Ethereum, transfer that over to Polkadot, and then deposit that on a liquidity pool in Polkadot in one seamless transaction without there any being risk of you being hacked, and you can do it comfortably and safely. And I think that's just one example in terms of DeFi about, as far as we're concerned, what DeFi should be. The ability to, without even thinking, jump in between chains and carry out different functionalities on chains. If we're talking about something like DeFi, excuse me, the other sort of aspects of interoperability or lack thereof sort of hinders is, you've got traps of liquidity in different places where, liquidity could be utilized in one ecosystem but can't really move around seamlessly. These are all things that are hindered by this lack of interoperability. I think the other thing that we're conscious of, at least internally at t3rn, is that the lack of interoperability is borderline holding back use cases that even haven't come to exist yet. DeFi is obviously incredible, and I think NFTs had a phenomenal run. I think they're here to stay as well. But I don't think those are the final use cases of blockchain. I don't think that's arguably our killer use case yet. And so what we're thinking about when we're developing t3rn is what the next future use cases will be and how we can develop our ecosystem and our technology to facilitate those. So I think, for these use cases to begin emerging, we definitely need to knock down these walls in between blockchains and ecosystems and allow for, seamless communication between them. So yeah, those are just a few examples, but I think, the short answer is I'm very, very excited for the use cases that are going to emerge that we even have no idea of yet once we solve this problem or conundrum of cross-chain interoperability.
Yeah, it's amazing. Polkadot was designed with interoperability in mind from the start. The planned Polkadot Kusama bridge would be enabled by the end of the year, as well as bridges to external networks like Ethereum and Bitcoin for trustless cross-networks interoperability. Why do we still need t3rn for interoperability?
This question is akin to, why do we need Polkadot, I guess. Ethereum is there, but why do we need other layer ones? And, the way we look at it, and you kind of answered it in the question as well, right, is Polkadot was designed in a different way to Ethereum, specifically with interoperability in mind, right? And so there are, there's not only Polkadot itself, but there are actually different cross-chain, multi-chain, omni-chain, whatever they want to call themselves, solutions out there as well. But not too differently from this whole, different layer one space where we've got, Ethereum out there, but we've also got the Solanas, we've got the Polkadots, we've got Avalanche, the list goes on. All of these projects and ecosystems, offer different benefits, but arguably different downsides too. And to answer your question, why is there a need for t3rn? It's simply because we offer a different approach to interoperability, and the way we see the cross-chain space panning out is that there will be this select group of the best multi-chain solutions out there, and the onus will be on users, on projects to decide which one they want to work with, which one suits their use cases and their ecosystems best, and then go ahead and integrate those. In some cases, in t3rn, for example, you can integrate one multi-chain solution on your ecosystem, but then t3rn offers a unique aspect to it as well that arguably enhances those solutions. So what I'm saying is, projects, users, developers will be choosing in between different multi-chain solutions, and we want to give them that selection and those different benefits of working with t3rn, just like there are in the layer one space, basically.
Okay, there's a lot of alternatives. In the Polkadot ecosystem, smart contract interoperability could also be expanding on Moonbeam through connected contract that enable data liquidity to seamlessly cross between chains of different consensus. It is a core pillar of blockchain interoperability in the Polkadot ecosystem right now. Compared with t3rn, who could be considered revolutionary?
Compared to who could be considered revolutionary, as in what other projects are doing good things in the multi-chain space, do you mean? Okay. I mean, so yeah, the work that Moonbeam is doing is definitely fantastic for sure. I think they're one of the premier, if not the premier, projects within the ecosystem. We've worked alongside them on a few initiatives, and the quality is very much there, and they have this very firm vision about how they see cross-chain, and it's certainly very compelling, and we're looking forward to working alongside them. So you said compared to t3rn, who could be considered revolutionary? I mean, the likes of Layer 0 are definitely doing very good work. I think Composable Finance out there as well are definitely very strongly and compellingly pushing their narrative as well. I think it's just a very, very exciting time to be in the multi-chain space. I remember when we started t3rn in 2020, there just wasn't that much out there. Like that, we were really sort of looking at the space and we're like, there's not that much, borderline competition, or there's not that many compelling solutions out there that are offering unique things. When we were sort of crafting t3rn and thinking about how we wanted to approach the problem. Now, like I said, Moonbeam, Composable, Layer 0, I think, despite the sort of difficulties Nomad has gone through, they've done some phenomenal work as well. There's just so many exciting solutions out there, and it really does make me feel like this problem of interoperability, is on the cusp of being solved, which is incredibly exciting. And I think I touched on it a bit earlier, that the way t3rn has been built and developed means that even if a project integrates a different interoperability protocol, we can sit on top of that and offer this unique aspect that we have baked into our protocol of reversibility and allowing to chain different executions across different blockchains in one seamless execution, of course. So seeing all of these projects that are coming out within the interoperability space, it just it's bullish for t3rn that we can sit on top of all these other projects and offer what we offer uniquely to users within those ecosystems. So to answer your question, compared with t3rn, who could be considered revolutionary, I think there's so many different brilliant ideas in terms of interoperability solutions and within Polkadot ecosystem as well, just as a layer one itself, around interoperability. And I'd say there's never been a more exciting time to be working within cross-chain and interoperability than now.
Yeah, they are all a great innovation, and they have to work together for the whole sector.
Yes.
So why did you choose Polkadot? What unique features the substrate framework allows t3rn to enable, which are not available in other interoperability protocols?
It's a very good question. So I think you briefly touched on it earlier, which is when we were devising a multi-chain solution, we wanted to work within an ecosystem that reflects that ethos, basically. And as you mentioned earlier, interoperability is one of the core pillars of Polkadot, right? So just having that ethos really spoke to us as a project to work within Polkadot. As I mentioned at the sort of beginning of our conversation, prior to t3rn, myself and Mathieu, we'd worked at Lisk, and Lisk primarily worked in JavaScript. And as much as JavaScript has, a lot of merits, we maybe felt that it wasn't the perfect language for developing secure blockchains, or at least cross-chain solutions in our eyes anyway. Whereas something like Rust, which is what Time's built in, feels like a very natural fit. It's a lot harder to make mistakes, to mess things up in Rust. And I think it's one of the most exciting languages that we've sort of seen emerge recently. So definitely the Rust aspect spoke to us as well. And I mean, Substrate, despite its undeniable complexities, it's a fantastic framework for building complex interoperability protocols. And I think all of these points that I've touched on, I think it's reflected in how the Polkadot ecosystem is growing. So I look at the quality of the projects building within the ecosystem, and it's hard not to be excited. I think I was reading a study recently as well that Polkadot is at an all-time high in terms of developer activity as well. I think it was like something like 500 commits or contributions a day. I might be wrong about that, but there's no denying or no two ways about it that developer adoption and activity within Polkadot is very much growing, and it's very much reflected in the quality of the projects within the ecosystem. So to answer your question, I think the cross-chain ethos, Rust and Substrate, very much were our guiding principles in building within Polkadot. We also had fantastic support from the Web3 Foundation early on, and I think all of these factors are now starting to come to light in terms of the quality of projects within Polkadot, and certainly in terms of developer adoption for sure.
As you mentioned, that Polkadot developers hit the all-time high during the last previous quarter. So developers are very important to move forward the widely used scenarios. How to encourage developers to join the t3rn ecosystem?
It's a really good question. It's very much something we thought about from the beginning of the project. These battles are won and lost through a developer adoption, arguably. And Mache, especially, he's been an open source developer for years. And one of the missions that are true to his heart is that he thinks that open source developers are arguably an underappreciated demographic. So you can be contributing to an open source code base. Suddenly that code base can be worth millions, if not billions of dollars. And the guys who contributed to that open source code don't participate in the economic upside that they created. I think sort of one of the prime examples we were looking at when we thought about this was, AWS is essentially built on open source libraries. The guys who built those libraries don't participate in, the billions of dollars that AWS generates. So when we were crafting the protocol and actually thinking about how we wanted t3rn to look moving forwards, we wanted to have an incentivization mechanism that fairly rewards developers for the code that they contribute. And so what I mean by that is that t3rn has an open source smart contract repository. Any developer can go in, contribute a multi-chain smart contract there. And then any user can go into that repository, take out that smart contract and deploy it and execute it. And the developer can opt to be remunerated every time that smart contract executes. So it creates this sort of model where developers can essentially get paid based on the open source code that they contribute. And we sort of think this is going to create this marketplace of smart contracts where if a developer sets their cost too high per smart contract use, no one's going to use it. But also too low doesn't particularly make sense because then they don't essentially make money. So I think it's going to be like the market's going to dictate what users think what fair pricing is, essentially. And we sort of see this as better than maybe these grants-based models that we see a lot of the ecosystems deploying, where they have hundreds of millions of dollars and they're just essentially paying developers to build within their ecosystems. I think this model at least makes more sense to us in that it's allows developers to contribute and get remunerated based on how useful their code is. So, if you deploy something like an ERC20 within Turn that everyone is constantly using and executing relentlessly, that essentially becomes a self-sustaining economy in itself. And so that was a model that we wanted to take and bake into the Turn protocol, where open source contributors can, live safe in the knowledge that they're going to be rewarded and remunerated for the open source code they contribute. And, the way we see it, at least, is that we hope this is going to encourage developers to take a look at and build within the ecosystem. Equally, we wanted to make that entry point into Turn as easy as possible as well. I'd say this is very much reflected in in our Turn architecture, essentially, but also in the fact that developers can easily deploy in Solidity, in Ink, and anything that WASM compiles, basically. So it definitely makes that entry point into Turn a lot easier as well. So to answer your question about developers, essentially we want to have this model that fairly remunerates developers for the open source code that they contribute, seamlessly allowing them to build projects that work across different blockchains and different ecosystems, and equally want to make that entry point for them as easy as possible and allow them to just deploy smart contracts on Turn in any language that they're comfortable with, whether it's Solidity, Ink, or anything else.
Yeah, and easy to access and fairly encouraged. Yeah, great. Let's talk about the hurdles you are facing, because there's a lot of things to overcome.
So, I mean, we're facing the same hurdles that essentially any multi-chain protocol is facing, and that's, essentially the negative reputation that comes with exploits, basically. So, cross-chain solutions, multi-chain solutions, bridges especially, they've borderline become a curse word in the cryptocurrency space, because there are so many exploits. I think it's like $1.5 billion has been exploited this year from bridges alone. We sort of touched on Nomad earlier. Wormhole had a tough time as well. There's, it shows how difficult it is to build solutions like this in a secure manner. This is something that we've also always, held true at Turn, that it's redundant building a solution that gets exploited. So we want to very much, we very much have security at our very core as a project. So I think we're quite good in that sense, although, only time will tell, because you only sort of know once you launch. But security is very much a core aspect of what we're building. And I think communicating that and getting users and projects to have faith in that is probably one of the biggest hurdles we're facing, because, I've heard discussions or people making the point that, multi-chain solutions are so unsecure that it's borderline not even worth approaching the problem, but let's just, keep things siloed, because it saves us getting exploited time and time again and damaging the reputation of blockchain as a whole. And I don't subscribe to that idea. It's a bit sort of, hiding your head in the sand for me. I think this is a problem that does need to be solved, and just continuing in silos, ecosystems, and ignoring the problem is definitely not the way to go. But I think the biggest hurdle that we are going to face, and every other multi-chain, cross-chain, omni-chain, whatever project is going to face, is getting people to trust and believe in the security of the solutions that they are building.
Yes, trust is very hard to get, but once you get it, we open a new world. So as our interview drawing to the end, anything you would like to add or remark?
No, I'd say, like I said, I've never been more excited to build in the multi-chain space, and I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time at Turn. So I'd say, keep your eyes out for a lot of very, very exciting announcements that we have coming in the next few months. It's a very exciting time to Turn, for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. And hope that if audience like a term, please leave your comment, and hope that we can work together to contribute to the Polkadot ecosystem. Yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank you so much for your time.